Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Napick, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Napick is on right now.
And welcome to the show, Successful Living with Bill Napick. That is me, and today, Successful Living with retired FBI agent Carlos Barron. Carlos, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
And first of all, thank you for your service. We think about people that protect us in the military and law enforcement, but the FBI, you guys are behind the scenes, I think, and sometimes we forget about you, that you're out there doing great work.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's tell people, first of all, Carlos, you have been retired now with the FBI just a few years, but let's tell people a little bit about the timeline of your career and even what inspired you to become part of such a wonderful organization and important.
Sure. Well, I actually was recruited by the FBI out of graduate school. I was going to graduate school at UC Davis in Northern California. I'm originally from California, a small town called Santa Barbara, just north of Los Angeles. So I was going to grad school in Davis, and I actually walked through a job fair one day, believe it or not, my first year of grad school. And there were booths there from state, local, and federal agencies. And I came upon the FBI booth, and there were three very imposing FBI agents from the Sacramento office with their, gray suits.
They look pretty serious, I'm guessing.
They're very serious. I was actually a little bit intimidated. But they saw me with, I think, that intimidation look, and they said, are you interested in the FBI? And I didn't know much about the FBI at the time, only what I had seen in movies and so forth. So I said, look, tell me a little bit about it. So they asked me three simple questions to start off with. They said, are you a U.S. citizen? And I said, oh, yeah, I'm from down south. They said, do you speak a foreign language? And I actually told them Spanish is my first language, because both my parents are from Spain originally. And then they said, have you ever been arrested for drunk driving? And I said, no. And they said, perfect, start filling these papers out.
Now, interesting they picked that question of all the things someone could be arrested for. There are so many, but wonder what was it about drunk driving than shoplifting or who knows what?
I think this was the late 80s when I think everything was about drunk driving and, don't do anything crazy while you're drinking, and drinking and driving was a huge issue. So this is something that the FBI focused on. It was a character trait, I believe, back then. So that's one of the three questions they asked me.
Fascinating and interesting also how they kept it simple to find out if you had the qualifications or even if this was the right beginning for them and for you. And, oh, yeah, I have to mention Santa Barbara. It's so beautiful there. How can anyone ever leave, by the way? But okay.
Great place to be from, I say.
Exactly. So anyway, so that's the timeline. You started, and from that meeting, from a time standpoint, how long was it until you were actually, I would think it's an FBI academy and there's a graduation. How long was it until that moment in your life?
The background took about a year to go through. So there was a numerous tests that I got in Spanish. There were background tests that I took with sort of what I call other FBI candidates. And then the actual background where they obviously to get employed by the FBI, you need a background investigation done because you need certain level of clearances to include top secret clearance. So that took an entire year. And what I mean by a background is they interviewed everybody that is associated with you, your roommates, your family, neighbors. They looked at your foreign travel. And so that process took a year. So at the ripe age of 25, with my bachelor's and my master's in my pocket, I headed over to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia for the 4 months of training.
Fascinating. And in total years, how long did you serve in the FBI?
4 months short of 25.
Wow, and you look so young. If people tune into the YouTube video, they're like, hey, how could that guy be even retired? He's young and so full of excitement. Tell people, unless it's classified, of course, but people that are serving right now in the FBI, what are the kind of numbers of people that are in the Bureau?
We have about 12,000 special agents of the FBI. Those are the gun-toting, gun-carrying FBI special agents. And then we also have a professional support staff in the almost 30,000 that obviously support all the investigations and everything that the FBI does. I mean, if you think about it, the FBI has a total employees almost about 40,000, and they have a yearly budget of $8 billion. So
wow.
Think of that if you compare it to a private corporation. It's an enormous organization, but it's made up of really, really good men and women.
And let's tell people, I think sometimes there's a confusion between what the FBI does and CIA. So, and by the way, there are, I guess, so many organizations, and there's NSA and other things, but specifically the FBI and CIA, what is the distinction?
Think of the FBI as operating within the United States and the CIA operating overseas. That's really how you divide it. Now, all these alphabet agencies that you've referred to are all part of what we call the broader intelligence community. So obviously that intelligence community works together, shares information together, but the CIA oversees the FBI in the United States, even though we have some presence overseas.
And again, the year that you started was
1991.
1991. And just from the idea of technology changing from 91, here we are, 2018. That's incredible right there.
It's truly incredible. My first office of assignment was Tucson, Arizona, on the border, because obviously I spoke Spanish, and that's one of the qualifications that the FBI was interested in. So they sent me to the border, and obviously I worked, major large-scale, Mexican trafficking organizations. But the interesting part is that when I got to Tucson, it was a very small office. There were 15 agents and 2 supervisors, and most of the agents were individuals that had tenure in the FBI. So I was fairly young because, everybody wanted to get to Tucson to retire. So the interesting part is I remember when we actually had...
Not me, I'm going to Santa Barbara, by the way, but okay.
Can't blame you. But so one of the things that we had is we actually learned email back then. When I first got there, I remember having a class with the older senior agents on GroupWise and how to use email. And the reaction of some of these agents, it was just fascinating. So I can go from there to having retired 2 years ago, where technology really is at our fingertips, where I could sit with my FBI phone and I could communicate, send an email, or send information, classified information, or just information to my counterpart in Baghdad.
And one of the things that comes to mind too, right from where you met the guys, the 3 gentlemen, where they asked you the question, is there a dress code? I mean, are they all wearing the black suits? I mean, or what was it like? Especially, I'm thinking of Tucson, Arizona, where that'd be kind of hot to be dressed like that. But what was there a dress code?
Well, there was, the guys that were recruiting were they fit the mold, and they had the dress code. Now, when you become an agent and you get to what we call the field, and you do field work, which is work that you have your investigations, you have your your informants, you have your liaison contacts on the border, for example, where I worked. Then obviously we had to dress down. So we were blend in. We had to blend in totally to what everybody else looked like, so we could go meet with individuals that were providing us information or do our investigations, and we didn't stand out.
And as you mentioned the word informant, first of all, to be in the FBI as an agent, right there, that could create some anxiety and with the danger involved. But also, I'm thinking, as far as the informant goes, that's a pretty tough position to be in too, where you can get in a lot of trouble. So you actually met and work with informants that they're out there helping, and they're kind of on the front lines too.
Absolutely. I mean, the sources of information and the human aspect of what the FBI does that a lot of people really don't know is we develop those informants and those sources of information that provide us very good information on all kinds of violations. And that's one of the keys of the FBI is we work hundreds and hundreds of federal crimes.
And I would think there's certainly an art to each and everything that is done, and protocol, system, and procedures that take place. But to handle and to develop the informant right there, that's a special art as well, I would think.
It's all about trust. It's all about relationships, and obviously following the FBI protocols that sometimes can be burdensome on the administrative side. But the key part is that ability to communicate and that ability to talk to people, not only informants, but all people.
That's very important. Yeah. And when we think about success, I don't care if we're in the FBI or if we are anything that we do in life, real estate agents, whatever, communication is so important. And when you got to the Bureau, you probably had some skills that they saw and certainly tested thereafter. But communication is so important. Let's give people an idea what you've learned that might help people, whatever they do, as far as communicating with people. We think it's simple, but it's not really.
I think it's, a lot of it has to do with body language. Sometimes we focus on communication being what comes out of your mouth. I've always believed that to establish rapport and communicate, it's what's not coming out of your mouth. It's how you're looking at someone, how you're addressing them, how you are engaging with them. So obviously, my parents are from Spain. I come from a Hispanic culture, so I'm maybe more touchy-feely than others. But at the end of the day, it's how you establish that rapport with that individual and understanding and respecting what his or her background might be, and having that being part of how you develop that relationship and communicate with them.
Very interesting. And also with the eyes, too, what we see.
Exactly.
How about and we see it, I guess I'm a child of the TV and the movies, and you talk about the body language. You see making eye contact, not making eye contact, people that are jittery and all these things. That's being watched, especially by law enforcement, I would think, at critical, perhaps, checkpoints as people travel, as they move around. Perhaps they're a suspect or they're looking for a suspect as far as law enforcement goes. They're watching everything, and they're trained in those movements and body language.
Exactly. It's really all about training and watching and observing. You'll get a lot of retired law enforcement folks, such as myself, that they'll never sit and have their back to a door. I mean, that's just, it's 101, and you do it by innate. Obviously, for 25 years, I did what I did, but a lot of my counterparts in any type of law enforcement, it's just an innate training, and you're just watching and observing things that others wouldn't see.
And certainly you see the world in a different way than most people do, because and we all see, and we're forced to see it via the news, the bad side of people and the bad side of organizations and groups, and we see the worst. But you have seen it in a different way, up close and personal, I would think. Let's tell people, what was your mindset if you knew, let's say you were preparing for something that, say, tomorrow you knew was going to be a more dangerous situation than right now? How did you prepare mentally for that, to go forth with that mission or project, whatever you call it?
One of the things that the fortunate part about being in the FBI is that, we rarely are reactive. Our law enforcement partners at this, state and local level that wear the uniforms and that patrol every day, they're reacting to things that they see. The FBI,
good point.
It takes a lot of time in preparing. So we rarely react. So we have, during that time of preparation, we have the ability to make sure that we are closely assessing everything that we're doing to, prior to get involved or engaging in a dangerous situation. So we have, preparation and plans. And, when I retired as an executive, one of the things that I always worried most and took care of was really, sending my guys or gals into a dangerous situation. And I'm referring to the SWAT team, for example. That signature that went on that piece of paper, that was one of the things that I thought about the most. And it wasn't because I'm going through the door, it's because somebody else was going through the door. And that person also has a family and a wife and, and kids and so forth. So that carefulness and thoughtfulness is, one of the differences, that we have that advantage versus our local law enforcement partners that don't. And
we're talking with Carlos Barron, FBI agent, retired just a few years. And let's tell people what you're doing right now, Carlos, because you're not really retired. You're still working and very active in the community and nationwide, or worldwide, really.
Yeah, one of the things that I did is I started a company with 2 other retired FBI special agents. And what we do is we provide in-safety security and safety consultation for American travelers traveling abroad. So we currently operate in Spain and Italy, and what we've done is the individuals that we have one individual in Spain, one individual in Italy, and what they do is they're individuals that worked for the FBI in these countries. So they know the local laws, they know local law enforcement, they know how the embassy protocols are, they know what the embassy will do and won't do. So this is a very inexpensive resource for any American traveler traveling to these 2 countries to be able to know that they have their own security person ready to help them navigate situations that they could face while in country. So we have Mark Vari in Spain and Melissa Thomas in Italy, and they have the same pedigree that you've just described with me. They have over 20 years in the FBI, but they served overseas in those countries.
And it sounds like they live there as well.
Exactly. And they live in the country, and they retired and live in Spain and live in Italy. So that's how they work for us now, and we have clients in both countries. And we help clients navigate situations that, Mark and Melissa can easily handle.
And the name of the company is?
Salus Security Services.
So if someone needs that kind of help in those countries, they can call you. And what's the website?
The website is www.salussecurityservices.com. And it's something that somebody would sign up prior to their travel, so they know they would have this resource for them while they are in country.
Under the same idea of being prepared.
Exactly, being prepared. And we also have a lot of clients that are American kids studying abroad, because obviously studying abroad is a big deal. So we have a lot of clients that are actually parents will sign their kids up during their time in Italy or Spain.
And when we think, I don't know much about Spain, but my heritage, my mother's parents came from Italy, so I heard a lot about it, never been there, but it sounds like such a wonderful place with pizza, with the Vatican City and rolling hills and all Lake Como, I guess, or Como, whatever it is. But it sounds like a beautiful and wonderful place. But yet some of these places can be perilous, right?
It is. I mean, there's always, anywhere we are in the world, even though it's safe as these countries might be, and believe it or not, Spain and Italy are considered by the Department of State Tier 2 threat countries. So there is crime. Sometimes it might be petty, but sometimes it might be something that could be dangerous. But the problem sometimes when you talk about security and safety is that people don't realize they need it until they need it. And that's what we try to do. Make sure that they're ready and prepared for when they do need to call someone in country, that they can simply reach out to somebody, not a 1-800 number, or not a hotline or a call center, but actually a live person with a first and last name, with the pedigree that we have from the FBI that can help them navigate a situation.
So your arms of security and safety reach across from Houston, and also you have an office in New York City as well.
Exactly
So you
right.
have two pillars right here in the U.S., it sounds like, that are here to help. And as far as people needing services, as you have these two offices, and by the way, I guess your brother, he may be listening to this show eventually.
Exactly.
He's in New York City,
He's in New
right?
York City, exactly. Yep.
That's a whole nother planet right there,
Right,
isn't
exactly,
it?
exactly.
There you go. But as far as the two places where you base your offices, which one would you say, do you both handle the same amount of Italy and Spain, or does it vary to the office,
It
whether
varies.
it's Houston or New York?
It varies to the office. I mean, it varies to the office, but at the end of the day, I think it's almost commensurate or even by the calls we get for both Spain and Italy. I mean, they're both two of the most visited countries by Americans.
Is that right?
In the world? Yes, Italy and Spain, and by students.
I didn't think of the student aspect, but also when I think of New York City, that's one of the main areas of the fashion industry. When you think about fashion in New York City or even Los Angeles, anywhere else, Italy is such a major player in the fashion world too. So I guess you have a lot of executives that go over there to do what they do.
Exactly.
Fascinating. So let's tell people, as far, you have to ask this. I grew up, and I'm older than you, but there was a show called The FBI, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.
Course, yeah.
Do you remember that? You had the FBI and so many TV shows and movies that portray law enforcement and the FBI along the way. Tell us, first of all, if you're a fan of any of those shows, Carlos, and which ones are more to the real world of what you dealt with and what you saw in your role as an FBI agent.
Well, believe it or not, the shows that I enjoy watching on TV are the cold cases, the actual real cases that sometimes are difficult to solve. Obviously, in the world we live in today with DNA, some of those cases are very, very difficult to solve, but some can be solved. Obviously, we had the Golden State, murder that was just recently found through a very creative investigative technique. So those are my favorite types of shows. It's, having been in the FBI, it's hard to say this show is more realistic, that show is more realistic, because the FBI for 25 years was my reality.
That's you were in the real world.
I was in that was my lens. So it's very difficult to say, oh, this is very similar, that's very similar. I think that each show has a slice that is realistic, but I think as a whole, I haven't yet seen one show that I go, wow, that is exactly what the FBI was like for me or, for any of my counterparts.
And let's talk personal protection right here, wherever people are listening and they hear the show beyond Houston. Certainly we're broadcast here, but let's take Houston, for instance. This is a big city, people from everywhere, and they're still coming every day. I don't know what the number is. I heard there was 700 people per day coming into Texas, whatever it is. A lot of people, we know it when we drive on the highways and everywhere else. But people are here, and they're still coming. And not all of them are good people. They're they're criminals and doing things like that. What should we know as citizens for our own personal protection? What should our systems and procedures be just as we move about doing our jobs and recreation?
I think I'm going to say what I told my teenagers when they started driving. I want your head on a swivel. I want your head. I want you to be awake and aware of your environment. I think it is about awareness. I think sometimes, we live in a big city and it's very, the space is controlled, and yeah, there might be traffic, but, compared to other places I've lived, I mean, there's space. And sometimes the space creates sort of a feel of, freedom and movement. You have to be aware of your surroundings. So your head has to be always on a swivel, unfortunately. Houston has an armed robbery problem. I mean, this is unfortunately, it's a beautiful city, wonderful city. I love living here. I've been here for, 14 years, but, there are a lot of guns being pointed at people during robberies, and triggers they're not being pulled, but there's guns being pointed. So I think you have to be aware of your environment. And you know what, if you don't have to put gas in your car at night, put it during the day. Just these type of things to be conscious and aware of your surroundings and your environment.
Always be aware, and not only that, because everybody, and I saw just driving over here today, not only was the driver looking at his phone, but so was the passenger. I looked over at the car next to me, and they're both looking while the car is moving. I'm like, what's that deal? But people, and I think for predators, when they see people with their heads in the smartphones, that's an opportunity for them to do what they may do. So we have to be aware, right?
Always. I mean, technology has great benefits. But technology also, we rely on it a lot, and it distracts us. So when I say head on a swivel, it's not head on a swivel holding your iPhone or looking at your, making a phone call or looking at the internet. It's actually head on a swivel, which means you're looking around and you're aware of your environment and your surroundings, and don't let technology take you away from that, as hard as that might sound.
It is very hard. It's addicting. We're attached to that.
Completely.
Because we think that next email may be very, very important. Carlos, with the last 3 minutes or so, what are some of the things you want people to know that they may find interesting about the FBI or about your company?
Well, let's start with the FBI. I mean, the FBI just want everybody to know that there are thousands of men and women who dedicate their life to the FBI. And they don't wear uniforms, and you might not know who they are. And they might be your neighbors, and you might not know who they are, depending on the type of work they do for the FBI. But they are individuals that want to ensure that we, as citizens, are all safe. And, the FBI works a slew of violations, federal crimes. Unfortunately, sometimes, the noise gets very loud about the FBI, and everything becomes a generalization. But the FBI is made up of really hardworking men and women that want to keep Americans safe and keep our country safe. That's number one. When it comes to my company, all I can say is that traveling abroad can be a fascinating experience. And I worked overseas in Spain, in Argentina, in Brazil, and in Mexico for the FBI, and I worked at the embassy. And I myself saw situations where American citizens needed help, and the embassy was helping, but there were some areas where the embassy couldn't help. And they kept asking and calling, can you refer me to somebody? Can you help me? This is that space that I think our company, SLS Security Services, fills for that American traveler that might run into a problem where it's not all red, where the embassy is going to be all in, but is that little gray where, oh my, what lawyer would I call? I just got put in jail. I don't know the Italian laws. The on-call person at the embassy maybe doesn't answer the phone. So this is the resource we offer at a very, very affordable price where you don't even have to think about it, but you know that person, that little fixer, is there for you.
Right here in Houston, Texas, or New York City. Easy. And again, the website, Carlos?
www.salussecurityservices.com.
Very nice. And let's tell people one more thing. We talked about being safe and being aware as we're outside of our home, doing our business, filling gas and at the store. But what about when we're at home? What should we think about when we're at our home, which is our safe place, theoretically?
I always, conscientious about, are the doors locked? Is the alarm on? Do I know the patterns in my neighborhood? Do I belong to a neighborhood watch program? Do I, belong to apps where the neighbors share information? Managing that, but without living in fear. We don't have to live in fear at the end of the day.
One last thing. As far as reading, are you a reader? Do you like to read?
I do like to read.
Any favorite authors?
Well, I have a degree in Spanish literature, so I read a lot of Spanish literature and a lot of Latin American literature. So I have, Carlos Fuentes, for example, was, a Mexican author that I very much enjoy his reading.
Very nice. Ladies and gentlemen, Carlos Barron. And one more time on the website, Carlos.
www.salussecurityservices.com.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for your service. Ladies and gentlemen, Carlos Barron, retired FBI, but still working very hard right here in Houston, Texas. You've been listening to Successful Living with Bill Nampick, and today, Carlos Barron. And until next week, check us out at radiobill.net if you want to hear any past shows. Again, that's radiobill.net. Until next week, thanks for listening. Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you.
How many bridges I got to